Our MC just got old-school isekai'd into the body of a baby. Fast forward a bit. He's now Karen Reston, and his awakening ceremony is only 2 days away. His father is spiraling with worry. He couldn't awaken as an infant, and fears the same fate for his son. But maybe things will be different for our newly isekai'd MC. Not long after, Karen and the family set out for the awakening trials. Upon arrival, they head to the family mansion to settle in, where Karen meets his cousin for the first time. Their meeting goes as well as it could, but when confronted, Karen spins a lie about his cousin insulting his father, intimidating young Leo into agreeing with the story. His grandfather has no choice but to drop the matter with the big day looming. The morning of the ceremony finally arrives. As they walk toward the sacred grounds, Karen is intrigued by the people present around him, but his eyes are strictly on the prize as they approach the Oathstone. Duke Yahello Reston stood before the gathered assembly and announced that the awakening ceremony would finally commence. He turned to Karen Reston, explaining that once the boy passed through the rift opened by the Stone of Oath, a world revealed specifically to him would unfold. Karen acknowledged his grandfather's instructions with a firm affirmation. Moving toward the Stone of Oath, Yahello held an ancient amulet in his hand. As he brought the relic close, the stone resonated with a sudden, violent energy, causing a portal to tear open in front of them. The resulting shockwaves surged through the entire space, signaling the way was clear. Yahello stared at his grandson and gave the signal to enter. Karen approached the swirling rift, keeping his objective in mind. As the portal sealed behind him, Karen found himself standing in a place that felt hauntingly familiar, mirroring the world of his past. He wondered in disbelief how the stone could be projecting memories of such a place, questioning if it intended to strike him with guilt by showing him his fallen, innocent comrades. His gaze traveled upward toward the palace stairs leading to the throne. Suddenly, a voice echoed his very thoughts. The voice announced that the time of the covenant had arrived and that it would fulfill the ancient vow made with his ancestors. When Karen demanded to know if the speaker was a demon, the voice countered that the blood in his veins was far too noble to be invaded by a lowly demon. It urged him to overcome his fear and ascend the throne. Karen walked toward the massive doors and pushed them open. As he approached the seat of power, the voice spoke again, welcoming the child who had received the blessings of the cold northern sea. It observed that his lost soul had finally found its way home. Standing before the throne, Karen saw the weapon mentioned by his grandfather, the demonic sword, Gluttony. He realized with a start that it was the very blade the Emperor had bestowed upon him in his past life. The voice commanded him to infuse the blade with his mana, but Karen hesitated. Wary of the sword's reputation for devouring the user's soul, the voice reassured him, explaining that the evil thoughts once dwelling within it had already been extinguished by his grandfather. It insisted that only Karen could truly awaken it. Though he feared returning to his old, darker self, he recalled the encouraging words of his father, Pale, and chose to move forward without further hesitation. The moment Karen grasped the hilt, the sword's energy resonated with his own, plunging his consciousness into a watery abyss. He recognized the state of Asura clarity as the blade began to purify itself. The voice confessed it did not know why the sword had met him in such a corrupted form, but it revealed the weapon was originally the blade of his progenitor, Rael. While Yahello also possessed a progenitor sword, this specific one had been erased from history because its power was so fundamentally different from the rest of the families. Karen struggled against the sword's immense energy, eventually pulling himself back into full consciousness. He felt a surge of joy as he realized the mana flowing through him had become significantly more intense. The voice revealed that the blade was the execution sword, Gluttony, a weapon that had beheaded countless demons and was born from the dark, pure depths of the north. Karen asked the voice for its identity. The voice responded that he did not yet possess the skills to handle its true name, challenging him to find it in the Northern Sea once he had dominated the waters with his own power. Karen scoffed at the challenge but asked how to exit the realm. When the voice suggested he already knew the answer, Karen took a combat stance and destroyed the throne, shattering the world around him. Outside, Pale and the others waited in anxious silence. Yahello urged Pale to compose himself, acknowledging the pain of watching a son walk a difficult, unknown path. Pale's worry turned to shock when the Stone of Oath began to crack and eventually burst, scattering energy everywhere. As the dust settled, Karen walked out looking dazed, questioning if he had truly returned, and wondering where the stone had gone. The onlookers were stunned, as Karen had physically destroyed the ancestral Stone of Oath. Pale was horrified by the destruction, but Yahello stared at his grandson in a mix of confusion and realization. He recognized the weapon in Karen's hand as the beheading sword of their ancestor, a blade passed down only through oral tradition. Knowing its origin, Yahello asked if Karen feared the sword, and when the boy admitted he did, the Duke felt a sense of destiny. He believed that the one destined to fulfill the ancient covenant with the blue dragon had finally appeared. Heirlo raised his hand and formally declared Karen Reston as a rightful member of the Asura Sea Fortress, and the direct descendant chosen by Gluttony, worthy of inheriting the spirit, Sea Star. This declaration sent a shockwave through the family. Raphael expressed his disbelief that a mere brat would receive such a prestigious inheritance, while Pale rushed to his son's side to ensure he was unharmed. Tails Reston watched with a chill running down his spine, noting the terrifying aura of the sword. Raphael, visibly annoyed, questioned Tails about the sword, but Tails admitted he knew nothing of it. Raphael couldn't understand why Pale's son was the one to obtain such a relic, but Tails insisted that now was not the time for internal bickering. Later, the family gathered at the train station, saying their goodbyes to Charon. The butler Heinrich suggested there was no place safer than the fortress, and Pale agreed, though his concern lay more with internal family threats than external ones. Heinrich informed Pale that Lady Sabina, Heirlo's sister, would be the one to conduct Charon's formal training. Pale was greatly relieved, knowing his aunt had always doted on him. Charon reflected on Sabina's reputation as the White Wolf, a master knight as skilled as the Duke himself. Pale advised his son to show her the utmost respect, and Charon promised to do his best. Before they parted, Heinrich delivered a message from Heirlo, offering Pale a residence at the fortress whenever he wished to visit. Moved to tears, Pale thanked the butler and bid his son a warm farewell. As Charon walked toward his new quarters with Heinrich and his guards, he expressed his desire not to keep his aunt-grandmother waiting. Heinrich gently advised him that Lady Sabina disliked that title and preferred he refrain from using it. Though slightly annoyed, Charon agreed. They soon arrived at the cultivation chambers, where Heinrich mentioned that Leo was also present. Charon felt a spark of excitement at the prospect of seeing his brother and waved goodbye to the staff. Approaching the door, Charon sensed an immense magical power radiating from within. A voice suddenly yelled for him to enter, startling him. He stepped inside and greeted Lady Sabina respectfully. She smiled at him, commenting on how much he resembled his father and how quickly time had passed. Charon was struck by her youthful appearance, wondering if she had reconstructed her body with magic, as she was a legendary 8-star knight. Charon had expressed his pleasure in training with the reputable White Wolf of the estate. Sabina ordered Charon to sit with Leo, who appeared visibly startled and nervous. Charon offered a friendly greeting, which Leo acknowledged with a bead of sweat on his brow. When Sabina asked how a child his age knew the title White Wolf, Charon claimed he had read it in a history book. Sabina found him intriguing, noting that Heirlo had predicted she would take a liking to the boy. As they began meditation, Sabina observed Charon's immense, untamed potential, comparing it to a vast sea. During the session, Sabina was shocked to see Charon carving out his mana passages intuitively, even before she had taught him the method. When Charon felt pain, he had the composure to slow down, whereas Leo overexerted himself and collapsed. Sabina realized she had been so focused on Charon's brilliance that she forgot they were still just children. Charon teased Leo for his lack of control, and Sabina noted that Charon possessed a maturity and self-control far beyond his years. She promised to guarantee his safety for the next 3 years so he could focus entirely on his strength. The scene then shifted to the training grounds where the Seawolf Knights were practicing. The Knight Commander, Xerus Winterguard, approached the boys. Charon recognized Xerus as another 8-star master. Xerus informed Charon that he would be handling his sword training, but stated he would not use noble titles until Charon had earned the respect of the knights. Charon replied that he preferred the lack of titles, as he was more interested in the family tradition of earning respect through strength. Xerus noticed that while Leo and the other knights seemed uneasy, Charon held himself with the poise of a true successor. However, when Charon flashed a mischievous smirk and remarked that they would all eventually bow to him, Xerus felt a sudden pang of fear. He realized that a character even more formidable and perhaps more troublesome than he anticipated had finally arrived. 3 years passed within the halls of the Asura Sea Fortress. Duke Heirlo Reston sat with his sister Sabina and the Knight Commander Xerus Winterguard, engaging in a light-hearted dispute as Heirlo complained that she was constantly stealing his private stash. Sabina dismissed his disappointment, reminding him that she had just spent 3 years at his request molding his grandnephew. When Heirlo inquired about her true impressions of the boy, her tone shifted to one of profound seriousness, describing Karen Reston as a monster. Heirlo found the term unsettling when applied to his grandson, but Sabina clarified that even the word genius felt like an insult to a talent so immense. Turning to Xerus, Heirlo found no solace, as the commander agreed completely. Xerus noted that compared to Hugo, the firstborn of Tails' family who was heralded as the Empire's greatest prodigy, Charon was vastly superior. This revelation caused Sabina to warn that such power would cause significant trouble for the family if not managed properly. She voiced her concerns regarding the line of succession, wondering what Karen's existence would mean for Heir's own sons. While Yahello bristled at the suggestion that his sons might threaten their own nephew, Sabina pressed on, noting that once Karen's talents were known throughout the Empire, the influence on the succession would be undeniable. The tension caused Yahello to glare until she changed the subject, asking if the family's legacy was truly at risk now that the Stone of Oath was broken and magical beasts were surging across the North Sea. Yahello dismissed her fears as absurd, explaining that the one who broke the stone was destined to raise a new one, fulfilling an ancient prophecy known only to the family head, which would soon place a heavy burden on Karen's shoulders. Meanwhile, in a different part of the territory, Pale was reading a letter from his son. Karen wrote with dutiful affection, apologizing for his long absence due to his engrossing training. The letter ended with a humble request for a bit more allowance. He remarked to Heinrich that he remembered his initial anxiety 3 years ago, yet the boy had adapted with surprising ease. Heinrich observed that while the fortress was never quiet, it might soon become impossible to prevent information about Karen from leaking to the outside world. This led Pale to realize that Karen might be assigned a mission soon. Pale confessed his lingering worry that his brothers would be displeased by Karen's growing influence, but Heinrich offered reassurance by noting Sabina's extreme fondness for the boy. Pale agreed, recalling how Karen's letters often mentioned her affection, and he teased that his monthly allowance payments to her had clearly paid off. However, a new concern arose as Heinrich confirmed that Sabina was scheduled to leave the fortress soon. He told Pale not to worry, as Karen had formed an unbreakable bond with the Seawolf Knights. The Knights had even bestowed a rather irreverent nickname upon the young heir, calling him the young mad dog of the Asura Sea Fortress. The reality of this nickname was evident on the training grounds, where Karen was engaged in a fierce spar with a middle-aged knight named Hans. With a swift attack, Karen shattered the man's wooden practice sword. Hans conceded immediately, but Karen was puzzled, questioning why the knight would twist his blade to take a hit rather than meeting strength with strength. He criticized Hans for being weak, despite his large muscles, which he jokingly referred to as balloon muscles. Hans admitted that facing Karen without using magic had become overwhelming over the past year. Hans mentioned that mission deployments were being decided by Xeris while the Duke was away in the capital. He suggested they might be sent to the granary region to deal with frequent magical beast appearances. When Leo overheard that they were being deployed, he felt a wave of dread, wanting nothing more than to avoid being on a mission with Karen. Despite this, he tried to focus, hoping that a successful mission might finally please his parents. In the midst of these developments, Pale then explained to Heinrich that he had been summoned to discuss a more sinister matter. Fief inspectors had discovered narcotics in a merchant wagon coming from the barony of Bellis. Pale ordered an immediate investigation into the barony from within the fortress. That same night, as an unknown figure arrived at the gates, Karen was busy amusing himself by pilfering a bottle from Xeris's private collection. He reflected that while he inhabited a child's body, he had not forgotten his old taste for liquor. His late-night excursion was interrupted by 2 men, one of whom was Baron Rohan of House Bellis. They were seeking the Duke on an urgent matter regarding Cheonghae Castle. Karen made his presence known, and although the visitors were skeptical of a child carrying a liquor bottle, Karen insisted on hearing them out. He argued that, if a noble came in person, it was only proper for a noble to receive him. The butler eventually agreed to inform Xeris, while Karen led Rohan to a meeting room. Rohan explained the dire situation in his lands. A group of bandits had settled in the eastern mountains, leading to the circulation of drugs and the kidnapping of commoners. He confessed that his father had been injured and bedridden after a failed attempt to stop them with their meager military. This caused Karen to drop his bottle in a fit of rage, declaring that such bastards deserved to be ripped apart. Karen expressed a personal desire to help, noting that the barony bordered his father's territory. As he offered Rohan a drink from the stolen bottle, Xeris walked in, catching them. Xeris scolded Karen for touching his liquor and for drinking at such a young age, but he quickly turned his attention to Rohan. He promised that the knights of Cheonghae Castle would not sit idle, while an old companion suffered and pledged to organize troops for the barony. Karen immediately demanded to be part of the mission. Xeris refused, citing the danger of facing trained deserters and experts, but Karen argued that overprotection was a hindrance. Xeris countered that a visible danger like the Western Front was better than the unknown threats in the mountains. However, Karen made an offer that Xeris found impossible to refuse, using his influence with Sabina to force the commander's hand. Later, as the magic train prepared for departure, Leo Reston appeared deeply distraught, his anxiety manifesting in a heavy silence even as Karen enthusiastically noted that this was their first real mission. Xeris felt he had been thoroughly outmaneuvered, realizing that Karen had cleverly used Sabina's influence as a shield to force his hand. Sabina joined the group, nostalgically recalling her own first mission and noting that while the nights could be dark, she would be there as a guardian. She clarified to Xeris that she did not intend to step in unless the boys were in danger of dying. believing firmly that they needed to face the challenge themselves to truly grow. Xeris accepted this arrangement, acknowledging that having the legendary White Wolf alongside them made the expedition significantly safer, regardless of her conditions. As the heavy iron doors of the station hummed with energy, Leo remained visibly shaken, causing Sabina to offer a final word of encouragement. She urged him to see this as a chance to prove his hard work over the last 3 years, and to finally be recognized as a true member of the Blue Wolves. Leo steeled his resolve and moved toward the carriage. Karen teased his brother, noting that he always seemed to need a push from behind, and they boarded the vessel together. Once inside, Karen continued to needle his brother, but Leo paid him no mind as he became lost in his own reflections. He understood that the time to prove his worth would eventually arrive, yet he had never imagined the moment would come so soon. As the magic train sped toward its destination, Sabina mentioned that her presence within Cheonghae Castle was a classified matter, necessitating that she remain hidden from the public eye, because if the bandits knew of her presence, they'd vanish without a trace. Rohan conceded this point, though as he observed Karen Reston, he secretly wondered if it was truly wise to entrust such a dire matter to 2 children. He noted that Karan seemed entirely oblivious to the concept of nerves, despite it being his first mission, while Leo Reston appeared visibly burdened by the weight of the task. Leo's distress was rooted in the harsh memory of his mother's words, as she had previously questioned if he possessed any sense at all for befriending Karan. She had reminded him that they were rivals, and that he had been disgraced by Karan 3 years prior. When she accused him of having no drive, Leo had defended himself by pointing out the staggering gap in their abilities. He noted that even their cousin Hugo, a renowned genius, had not reached the 3rd star until age 14, yet Karan had attained the 4th star at only 13. Leo viewed Karan not as a rival, but as a goal that pushed him to work harder. His mother had merely exhaled in frustration, believing he was staring at the trees but failing to see the forest. Pulling him from this trance, Sabina asked if he was finding it difficult to shake his nerves. When he admitted his anxiety, she inquired if he could truly bring himself to cut an enemy down. She teased that while Karen was the type of boy who would sell someone off to save his own skin, Leo simply thought too much. Karen stirred at these words but paid them no mind, while Sabina reassured Leo that she knew his worth and the effort he had invested over the past 3 years under her tutelage. The rhythmic clatter of the tracks was interrupted by an announcement that the train would arrive in the Bellis territory in 20 minutes. Hearing this, Sabina stood and informed them that for the duration of the mission, they should address one another as master and disciple, only for her to open a window in the sitting area. She explained that word would spread instantly if she appeared at the station, so she intended to move out first. Karen looked up, addressing Sabina as being as bold as ever, but she paid him no mind as she prepared to depart. She told Rohan that her grandnephews would be watching from nearby, and then she leaped swiftly from the moving train. While the others were struck with worry, Karan simply laughed at the absurdity of the exit, leaving Rohan to wonder why everyone in House Reston seemed so eccentric. Upon arrival, they were met by the Baron's father, who appeared visibly ill and frail. He apologized for receiving the young wolves of House Reston while seated, but Karan dismissed the formality, asking after the man's wounds. The elder Baron expressed his appreciation. He remarked on how much Karan had grown since their last meeting 10 years prior, suggesting that Pale must be very proud. The elder then observed that reaching the 4th star at such a young age was the reason the main family had dispatched them, though he still hesitated to assign such a dangerous task to such promising youths. Karan countered that failing the mission would disgrace the honor of the Blue Wolves and affirmed their intention to succeed. Sensing the Baron needed rest, the boys took their leave to meet the prepared guide. As they walked with the guide, Sven, Leo whispered his doubts to Karan, questioning if they could trust a mere herbalist. He worried that Sven might be in league with the bandits. Karan praised Leo for finally using his brain, confirming that the guide was almost certainly part of the bandit crew. When a confused Leo asked how he knew, Karan reminded him of their earlier talk with the younger Rohan. The Baron had mentioned using a traitor to track the hideout, and Karan had realized that keeping a traitor close was a desperate but necessary tactic. He had refrained from telling Leo earlier, because his brother had been so wound up in nerves. The trap was soon sprung as bandits appeared and dropped a sack of gold into Sven's hand. They praised Sven for his good work, though one bandit noted that the young masters did not look like they would surrender quietly, with Karan declaring that the bandits were in for a treat for spreading narcotics in his father's domain. Back at the castle, the elder Baron coughed heavily while Rohan nursed him. Rohan questioned if the boys would be all right, and his father responded that the Blue Wolves' confidence in them was proof enough of their skill. He noted that Karen reminded him of a young Duke Yahello, possessing the same magnanimous attitude and confident demeanor. The scene shifted back to the forest, where Karan was already laying waste to the bandits. His agile swordsmanship and the smile on his face terrified the enemy, who could not even trace his movements. Even Leo had to admit Charon was fighting like a monster. One bandit urged a retreat to inform their main unit, but their leader refused to be intimidated by a brat who smelled of milk. As the man rushed forward, Charon calmly remarked on how loud and ridiculous he was before swiftly slicing him in two. Annoyed that blood had stained his clothes, Charon approached the last remaining man, Orha, who immediately surrendered. Charon ordered Orha to provide a rope, and soon Leo and Charon were walking toward the hideout tied up, with Orha carrying their weapons. Leo questioned the necessity of the charade, but Charon insisted they had to be convincing Bates to find the main base. He noted that it wouldn't make sense for two powerful young nobles to be captured by someone like Orha unless they looked vulnerable. Orha was secretly fuming at the insult, but remained terrified of Charon's blue, glowing eyes. During the trek, Charon confirmed that the bandits were deserters from the Kingdom of Seas in the south. Orha revealed their group numbered 130 men, including a mage and 2 knight escorts. This information caused Charon to pause. It was highly irregular for a mere infantry unit to be accompanied by a high-level mage and knights in such a poor territory. He suspected there was more to the story than simple banditry. They soon reached a small fort, where the guards questioned why Orha was alone and carrying noble weapons. Orha claimed he had taken them after the others went to chase off the boys' guards. Once inside, Charon sensed an ominous, spooky power ahead. They discovered a gruesome scene. Crows nailed to poles around a summoning circle, a sacrifice for a dark ritual. Charon immediately ordered Orha to return his sword and cut their ropes, telling Leo to draw his weapon as well. As 13 skeleton soldiers emerged from the portal, a group of men appeared. Their leader, Michael Knox, welcomed the noble rats to his stronghold. Charon realized the black mage was likely hiding nearby, chanting spells. Raising his sword, Charon threatened to cut Urha's throat if they attacked. While Leo felt the pressure of the numbers, Charon remained unfazed. But this tactic didn't work, because Michael didn't see Urha as a useful member, and so Charon told Leo to handle the skeletons, while he took on the commander. This caused Leo to panic internally, wondering how he could possibly manage so many undead alone. Charon dashed forward, slicing the hands of the archers to disarm them before reaching Michael. He effortlessly sliced Michael's hand and leg, bringing the leader to the ground. Charon taunted the fallen man, who cursed the Asura sea fortress for interfering. Charon explained that the barony was next to his father's lands, and informed Michael he would be dragged back to the fortress as a prisoner. Leo, meanwhile, was successfully holding his own against the skeletons, earning a nod of pride from his cousin. Charon ordered Michael's men to disarm, and they complied out of fear for their master's life. Michael secretly hoped his reinforcements would arrive to crush the brats, but Charon saw through him, asking if he was waiting for the black wizards. Suddenly, the magic circle vanished, and an explosion rocked the area. Out of the smoke stepped Sabina, carrying a dismembered head. She told the boys they had missed the most crucial evidence, declaring the mission a failure. When a pissed-off Charon kicked Michael and prepared to finish him, Sabina stopped him. She gave them credit for charging into the enemy's jaws like House Reston warriors, but she deducted points for staging a sudden hostage act. Michael was horrified to realize the head Sabina held belonged to the powerful mage he was relying on. As Sabina called Charon a lunatic for his tactics, he simply thanked her. They decided to return to the castle for questioning, leaving a broken and humiliated Michael Knox cursing them in his mind. Upon their arrival at the prison, the bandits' captives were finally liberated, leading to emotional reunions as families were brought back together. Orha stood silently beside Charon, who noted that the man seemed to be wearing a look of guilt. Charon tapped him lightly, suggesting it was a bit early for such feelings, and pointing out that being thrown into the Baron's local prison with his comrades might have been a simpler fate. Instead, Orha was destined for the Asura Sea Fortress alongside his commander. As the soldiers finished tying the bandits together, Sabina approached and questioned if it was wise to leave Orha unrestrained. Charon explained that they needed someone to assist in transporting the injured bandit leader to the fortress anyway, as the man was in no condition to walk. He warned Orha not to let his guard down. Just then, a commoner approached Charon to ask if Orha would truly be punished. Charon confirmed that he would be, as he was technically a bandit, but the person pleaded for mercy. They revealed that Orha had genuinely taken care of the prisoners, secretly bringing medicine to the sick, and sharing his own meager food with those who were starving. Sabina asked Charon for his thoughts on the matter, and after a moment of reflection, Charon decided they should consider leniency, noting that Orha had also served as their guide to the hideout. Overjoyed, Orha pledged to serve Charon loyally for the rest of his life. This interaction was interrupted by Leo, who called them into a different room where they discovered numerous barrels filled to the brim with magic stones. As night fell and the soldiers began the trek back, the bandits were met with the insults of the townspeople. Leo remarked that the young baron would likely throw a banquet in their honor, but Charon was preoccupied with the discovery of the stones. He realized there was a strategic reason such a large group had occupied the remote mountains of the insignificant Bellis barony. The baron's family likely had no idea a magic stone mine existed on their land. Charon's face twisted into a mischievous smirk as he considered the immense profit such a mine could yield, regardless of the stone's current quality. When they met with the younger baron, the soldiers escorted the prisoners away. Sabina confirmed that they would be taking the bandit leader with them, to which Rohan readily agreed. When Rohan attempted to request something further from Sabina, she brushed him off, stating she was only there as a guardian for her students. Rohan then invited them to a modest banquet, but Charon declined, insisting they had to return to the Asura Sea fortress immediately. He suggested they settle the matter of the commission payment right then. Rohan admitted that the barony lacked the means to pay the fee and requested a deferral. Charon smirked, pointing out that the Bellis territory was a remote place with no specialties, which made the bandits' presence there quite suspicious. He then revealed a mana stone, much to Rohan's astonishment. Rohan confessed he had no idea a mine existed in his territory. Charon proposed a deal. House Reston would provide the initial capital and security forces to co-develop the mine. Rohan was internally shocked, wondering how a mere child could propose a negotiation of such magnitude. He realized that having the Reston family hold a stake would solve their storage and defense issues, and he suspected Charon had already calculated these benefits. Charon added that if the project proceeded, the Heron Knights could be stationed there, boosting the local economy and solving the barony's defense problems. When Rohan asked about the specific share the Duke's house would require, Charon redirected him to speak with his father, Pale, playfully claiming that a kid like him wasn't qualified for the finer details of business. Sabina found the entire exchange quite amusing as Rohan agreed to contact Pale soon. As they prepared to board the train back, Charon asked Sabina why she had considered the mission at the hideout to be complicated. She explained that the man she had defeated was Ted de la Rita, a 6th Circle dark mage and a Class 2 wanted criminal. Charon was shocked by the revelation. Sabina lectured him, noting that while he and Leo were busy with small fry, a dangerous fugitive was operating in Imperial territory. She emphasized that true strength comes from fighting powerful opponents, and because they hadn't prioritized the mage, she deemed the mission a failure. Charon accepted the critique as his master's lesson, while Leo felt strangely left out until Sabina complimented him for handling the undead well on his first attempt. This caused a flush of pride in Leo, who promised to have more confidence in the future. Back at the Asura Sea fortress, Duke Yahello Reston returned to a flurry of activity. Heinrich informed him that the Western deployment had returned, and that Charon and Leo were on their way back with Sabina. Suddenly, a messenger arrived with an urgent letter from the Emperor. Yahello was startled, noting the Emperor had said nothing before he left the capital. Upon reading the contents, he was shocked to find that the Emperor was personally inviting Charon to the capital, a summons that would change the boy's future significantly. When the group finally arrived at the estate, Orha carried the captive Michael Knox on his shoulder. Michael tried to convince Orha to escape with him, claiming he would eventually be imprisoned too, but Orha punched him in the face and told him to shut up. He refused to listen to a man who had called him useless. Just as Pale arrived, Pale greeted Sabina, noting that his older brother had likely summoned him because of Charon's exploits in the barony. Sabina smiled, while Leo respectfully bowed to his uncle. Pale praised Leo for distinguishing himself as well, mentioning that the news had already reached them. As they walked, Sabina asked Pale about the unstable situation in the Empire. Pale explained that powerful families, centered around Duke Salmon and Marquis Diaz, were quickly uniting. These were the men who had overthrown the previous tyrant, and now held the real power. Pale noted that the Age of Peace was ending. At the entrance, Xerus met Charon, noting his exploits against the deserters. He took Michael Knox for interrogation, promising to extort every bit of information. When Hans asked about the man carrying the leader, Charon identified him as a bandit, but requested he be handled lightly, as he intended to use Orha as a personal servant. Xerus then informed the boys that their mission wasn't over until they filed a formal report. Charon immediately pushed the task onto Leo, claiming that since he did the hard work, Leo should handle the writing. He convinced a hesitant Leo by pointing out that the report was a chance to highlight Leo's achievements to their uncle. As Charon headed for the training hall to practice with his 4-star mana, Xerus watched him go, marveling at the boy's dedication. Later that night in the Duke's office, Yahello met with his family and commanders. He revealed a piece of monster hide taken from the West, explaining that the energy within it was the black aether of the dead tyrant emperor. This led to a chilling conclusion. Either the tyrant's will remained, or he was still alive. Heirlo then informed Pale and Raphael of the emperor's summons for Charon. He decided to send Leo and the Sea Wave Knights along for protection, though he intended to ask Charon's opinion first. Heirlo instructed Heinrich to bring Charon to the office, while in a quiet study elsewhere, Charon sat in meditation, unaware that the political atmosphere was about to become far more tense. Charon continued his meditation until he sensed a presence nearby, prompting him to ask when the visitor had arrived. Xerxes, who had just entered to summon him, noted that he had not been there long. As Charon rose, he remarked that, besides direct family, Xerxes was the only one allowed in the laboratory, yet he could not recall the commander ever entering before. He questioned if the matter was urgent, to which Xerxes explained that Charon would likely have to depart for the capital soon. The head of the family had summoned Charon to the council to hear the details directly. Xerxes then escorted Charon to Duke Heirlo's office, where Heirlo's other children were already assembled. Heirlo acknowledged Charon's arrival, noting he had just completed his first mission, before questioning why Charon had acted independently in business negotiations with the Bellis family, without the right to represent the house. While Charon briefly considered that this was a scolding rather than a celebration, Heirlo pressed further, asking if it had occurred to the boy that his arrogant behavior was a discourtesy to the Baron. Charon firmly replied that he had merely proposed a deal, which the Baron accepted of his own will. He added that he had judged something to be far more important than formal etiquette, a statement that stunned Heirlo. When asked what could possibly be more important than courtesy to a noble, Charon identified the honor of the family. This response left the assembly silent. Heirlo reflected that despite the value of the deal, Charon had not boasted of his own achievement, but had prioritized the family's benefit. Heirlo concluded that the deal would be a great benefit, and decided to let Pale handle the remaining negotiations. Pale accepted the task, vowing to depart for the barony at daybreak. Turning to the matter of the emperor, Heirlo revealed that Charon has been summoned by His Majesty. Heirlo offered Charon the option to stay behind to avoid drawing further attention, but Charon insisted on going, mentioning his desire to see his maternal grandfather Gale after a long while. Heirlo confirmed that Leo would accompany him under the escort of Hans's squad. When Charon cheekily asked if an escort was necessary given his own strength, Heirlo told him not to flatter himself. The guards were not because he was special, but because no one knew what trouble he might cause next. Charon was dismissed with orders to depart in 3 days. The following day, the negotiations between House Reston and the Baron were successfully concluded. Pale inquired if the elder Baron was aware of the terms, and Rohan confirmed his father's agreement. The shares were set at 80% for Reston and 20% for Bellis. Pale expressed confusion over the Baron's insistence on giving 5% of his own share to Charon and Leo, suggesting it was an excessive reward for a commission fee. Rohan explained that the gesture was an investment to win the favor of the 2 young wolves who would one day lead the fortress. Pale acknowledged the boldness of the decision and praised Rohan's brilliance. Before ending the meeting, Pale sought the children's opinions, and Charon graciously accepted, vowing to build a strong bond with the house. As the time for departure neared, Leo questioned how they would split their shared interest in the mine. Charon jokingly suggested a 9-to-1 split in his own favor. Though Leo initially protested the unfairness, Charon teased him about their recent friendship until Leo playfully conceded. Pale watched them with a smile, noting that while they used to bicker constantly, they now seemed inseparable. Before the journey, the boys gathered in their quarters, where Leo expressed his nervous excitement about seeing the capital and its social parties. Sabina appeared suddenly, startling them, and remarked that the capital was an interesting place filled with strong fighters. She looked for wine glasses in the 13-year-old's room to celebrate their first mission, and when Charon pointed out the oddity of her request, she threw glasses at them anyway. She teased that Charon was always stealing wine, and asked if Leo had ever tried it. Leo admitted he had, because Charon had shared some previously, leading Sabina to joke that Charon had made him an accomplice. Pouring the liquor, Sabina told them not to be shy as their master was serving. She noted they had grown splendidly and felt a tinge of regret that she would not see what trouble they would cause in the capital. As her promised 3 years of teaching were over, Leo became emotional, asking if they would see her again since she was returning to the North Sea soon. Sabina teased his sentimentality, warning him that he would never talk to women in the capital if he remained so emotional. She jokingly advised Leo not to stay too close to Charon, whose talent and smooth tongue would surely lead to Charon being flogged while Leo was left alone. Leo playfully grabbed Charon, telling him not to ruin his marriage prospects, while Charon told the simpleton to shut up and drink. In his office, Heirlo sat drinking alone until Pale arrived. Heirlo confirmed the success of the negotiations and noted that Rohan was a clever man for securing an alliance with House Reston. He officially placed Pale in charge of the Bellis affairs. Turning to the Emperor's invitation, Heirlo admitted it was highly unusual. He recalled the fear in the Emperor's eyes during their last audience, a fear that Heirlo might treat him as he had the previous tyrant. He suspected the summons was the result of outside political influence from factions like Duke Salmon and Marquis Diaz. Pale asked why Heirlo had not refused the request, and Heirlo confessed he wanted to measure Charon's potential. Since Charon was the one chosen by the ancestral sword, Gluttony, he was destined to be at the center of the world and would face constant danger. Heirlo wanted to see if the boy could endure the pressure of the family's future. When asked if he was worried, Pale replied that he believed in his son, an answer that satisfied the Duke. The next morning, Sabina prepared her horse for departure. Xerxes met her outside, asking if she would say a separate farewell to the boys. She declined, mentioning the wine they had shared the night before. This caused Xerxes some irritation, as he realized she had touched his private stash until the very end. As she rode off toward the northern sea, she bid Xerxes a loud farewell. Charon watched her go, clutching a paper from her stating her destination and inviting him to visit. As his master's silhouette faded, Charon sensed that with her gone, his uncle would likely begin making a move. His suspicions were confirmed when Tails suddenly appeared, noting that the ant had finally left. Charon glared at him, thinking to himself that the devil had appeared right on cue. The party arrived at the train station with their belongings loaded and ready for the long journey ahead. Charon observed Xerxes carefully overseeing the final arrangements, ensuring every detail was in order. When Charon questioned why such a fuss was being made, Xerxes explained that it was only natural, as the young masters were destined to meet the Emperor and other high-ranking representatives of the Reston family. Charon then turned his attention to Hans's squad, questioning the necessity of their presence. Xerxes clarified that their purpose was to protect the young masters, though Hans pointedly added that it was also to ensure they didn't cause any trouble. This caused Charon to mutter about the pain of having so many nuisances around. His mind drifted back to a final encounter with Tails. Hans had greeted Tails with a slight bow, and Tails had turned his attention to Charon, acknowledging the imperial invitation. Tails had urged Charon not to act in the capital, as he did within the walls of Blue Sea Castle, a request Charon accepted with a simple affirmation. However, the interaction left Charon with the stinging realization that Tails had openly admitted to having him watched. Tails warned that the capital was full of enemies eager to tear down their family, and he promised to personally punish Charon severely should he provide them with an excuse. Charon had thanked him for the wise words, but as Tails walked off, Charon smirked at the perceived joke. He viewed the threat as an attempt to pressure him using the status of a firstborn son, and secretly resolved to one day twist that arrogant face. With the preparations for the capital complete, Charon found himself having another go at Hans. The bickering was interrupted by Orha, who approached to thank Charon for giving him another chance. Charon, playing the troll, teased Orha by claiming he was only taking him along to throw him into a capital prison. Soon, the squad leader's voice crackled through Hans's communication metal, announcing that all members had boarded. Xerxes bid them farewell, urging them to return safely without causing trouble. Charon retorted that such words made them sound like habitual troublemakers, but Xerxes countered that a bucket that leaks on the inside will surely leak on the outside. Just before departure, Pale ran toward the train, catching his breath. He explained that while the Duke had summoned him, he needed to see his son one last time. He mentioned that Charon's maternal grandfather, Gale, was eagerly awaiting them in the capital. Charon expressed his own excitement, jokingly mentioning the presents he expected to receive. Pale smirked, urging them to keep the trouble to a minimum, a recurring concern that even made Leo laugh at Charon's expense. As the train finally departed, Tails watched from his reading room window, glaring as the vessel vanished into the distance. After some time on the road, Charon asked Hans how much longer the journey would take. Hans noted it would be approximately 6 hours, following a route through the Thebes Autonomous Region. Leo observed that Thebes was an unusual city where commoners elected their own mayor, and where commerce flourished over agriculture. Charon noted it was the place where the most money circulated in the empire, and Hans agreed, explaining that in Thebes, money was status. This immense capital allowed them to wield influence. Charon expressed interest in visiting, but his thoughts were interrupted by an announcement that they were entering the region. Suddenly, his sword began to resonate, a clear omen of sensing danger. Charon gripped the weapon, wondering if Tails or Raphael had planted someone among the escorts, but he dismissed the idea as too foolish for them. He immediately ordered Hans to contact the Thebes Autonomous Region and told the guards to brace for an attack. Hans followed the order through his metal, even as he questioned the suddenness of it. Charon realized that if the threat was external, an attack on a moving train was imminent. Outside, in the distance, robed men stood before oil-filled barrels placed directly on the tracks. As the train rushed toward them, their leader signaled for the fuse to be lit. The train crew barely had time to brace before a massive explosion rocked the vessel, sending everything within flying. In the city of Thebes, the local government was in a state of chaotic argument. Merchant and noble factions clashed over tax audits and money laundering accusations. Mayor Grind lamented his position, wishing he had retired as Minister of Finance, instead of dealing with the senseless bickering of a city where equal opportunity had turned into a mess of competing interests. An aide whispered urgent news into the mayor's ear, causing him to dismiss the meeting. When asked if the tax audit was canceled, the mayor declared the audit could go to hell, announcing instead that the train from the Reston estate had been struck. Back at the wreckage, the scene was one of disarray. Hans tended to Leo and checked on Caron, who reported only a small scratch. The situational report was grim. 11 seriously injured and 2 casualties in their car, including the lower-ranking Orha. Hans informed the boys that they were 10 kilometers from Thebes and that the region's forces should be mobilizing. He urged the young masters to run while his squad bought them time. Caron, however, noticed his sword, Gluttony, reacting again. Seeing the attackers approaching through the smoke, Caron smiled and refused to flee. He pointed out that the attackers had destroyed Imperial Railway property, an act of treason, and noted that running was impossible with Leo's injured leg. Caron asked Leo if he could still fight, and receiving an affirmative, he declared there was only one option. With a swift movement of his sword, Caron sliced the leg of a man standing outside, causing the others to recoil in shock. As Caron, Leo, and Hans stepped out of the wreckage, they were met by a large group of skilled fighters, all rank 3 or higher, with a rank 6 leader at the front. The leader, his voice distorted by magic, demanded that Caron surrender his weapon in exchange for the lives of the knights and servants. Caron laughed, challenging them all to come at him at once. The attackers realized Caron was no ordinary child, but Hans stepped forward, placing himself between the boy and the rank 6 opponent. Hans told the leader that he was only hurrying his own death, and as the Knight of the Sea Wave braced for impact, the confrontation began. The battle between Hans and the bandit erupted with a fierce intensity that pushed both men to their limits. As their blades clashed, Hans found himself struggling to keep pace, noting with grim concern that the man was deflecting his attacks. Despite the leader's skill, the tide of the broader skirmish had already turned in favor of House Reston, as Caron and Leo were efficiently dismantling the other attackers. The bandit leader dashed forward, mocking Hans for having the luxury to be distracted. But Hans countered by pointing out that their formation had already collapsed. He urged the man to surrender, noting that further resistance was meaningless, and there was no need to die in a foreign land. The leader, surveying his fallen troops, stoically replied that he had no intention of being persuaded, and would fulfill his mission at any cost. Suddenly, the air grew heavy as the man activated a volatile mana blast within himself. His energy surged in a dangerous mana backlash as he lunged for a final assault. Hans, taken aback by the force, reinforced himself with his own mana to withstand the impact. Just as they were about to collide, Caron appeared behind the bandit like a ghost, mockingly asking if he was giving up already. Before the leader could react, Caron's sword flashed, severing the man's hand. Even in agony, the bandit maintained a chilling calm, calling Caron a monster. Caron smirked at the compliment, thanking him for the words. But his satisfaction was short-lived. He felt his sword vibrating with a warning of a lingering threat. He demanded to know what the bastard still had planned, only for the man to offer a cryptic apology, stating he held no grudge. Realizing the danger, Hans dashed towards Caron and screamed for his squad to protect Leo. He recognized the man was initiating a self-destruct spell. Caron, confused, demanded to know what Hans was doing, but the knight simply apologized for his own perceived incompetence as the forest was consumed by a blinding explosion. When the smoke cleared, Caron stood up and immediately kicked Hans on the face, demanding to know how long he intended to stay down. Hans, huffing from the effort of shielding the boy, called him a damn brat for showing such ingratitude after he had gone out of his way to protect him. Caron retorted that he had never asked to be saved, though he secretly knew that without the protection of his sword, things would not have ended so lightly. Their bickering was interrupted by the arrival of a carriage. Caron sensed no further enmity, and soon Heir, captain of the vigilantes of the Thebes Autonomous Territory, presented himself. Hans introduced himself and Caron, and Heir expressed the territory's deep regret for the incident, explaining they had been ordered by Mayor Grind to escort the members of the Great Reston House. Caron accepted the escort, noting the many wounded who needed care. During the carriage ride to Thebes, Hans questioned if it was wise to continue rather than returning to Cheonghae Castle. Noting that the threat might not be gone, Charon dismissed the concern, stating he had already contacted Xeris and that Hans was overthinking as usual. He noted the situation was becoming far more complicated, as the attacker was Shion Hakimi of the Paba Sultanate. This suggested that the non-aggression pact secured by Duke Heirlo was being shaken, a fact that could serve as justification for war. When he looked to Leo for agreement, he saw his brother's hands shaking. Charon observed that it was Leo's first time taking a life and acknowledged that such a burden was never easy to overcome, yet necessary for survival. Upon entering the fancy territory, they were welcomed by Mayor Grein. The mayor pledged his full cooperation, and Hans noted that the man seemed far more stressed than during his time as Minister of Finance. Grein lamented his choice to become mayor, but Charon urged him to speak comfortably, as formal honorifics from an elder felt out of place. The mayor, ever the politician, initially demurred, but eventually accepted the invitation to speak casually. The discussion soon turned to the explosives used to destroy the tracks. Charon pointed out that such materials were under strict imperial control and suggested they might have been smuggled in from the Paba Sultanate. This caused the mayor visible discomfort. Charon pressed further, suggesting that if Thebes merchant guilds were involved in such smuggling, it would be a significant problem for the mayor. Grein was struck by the boy's sharp deduction, realizing that if he did not agree, he might be suspected of complicity. Terrified by the implied threat, the mayor quickly changed the subject, asking after Charon's father and claiming a brotherly connection to Charon's maternal grandfather, Gale. Charon noted the sudden listing of connections was a classic political move. The mayor defended his stance until they were interrupted by an aide with urgent news. While the mayor assumed it was the arrival of the Imperial Guard, the aide revealed that the Commissioner of Taxation himself, the Demon King Gale Ferriton, was leading the special division. The mayor turned to Charon, wondering if he had expected this. Charon confirmed he had, knowing his grandfather cherished him enough to drop everything to save a grandson in danger. The city streets were lively, filled with the hum of a population unaware of the tension brewing behind closed doors. Security guards roamed the thoroughfares, their presence doubled as they escorted Gale Ferriton through the bustling corridors. Some strange men whispered as they passed, noting that since the matter concerned his grandson, the Commissioner of Taxation had arrived with terrifying speed. Inside the mayor's office, the atmosphere was far from peaceful. The local merchant representatives were shouting with their usual fervor, causing Mayor Grein's patience to snap. He slammed his hand against the table, his voice booming as he demanded to know if they truly failed to grasp the gravity of the situation. Before the merchants could offer a rebuttal, Charon stepped into the room. He reinforced the mayor's stance, pointing out that not only had the Imperial Railway been destroyed, but the grandson of Archduke Reston and the personnel of Cheonghae Castle had been targeted with explosives. He emphasized the suspicion that these weapons had been smuggled through the very trading guilds currently standing in the room. The merchants looked puzzled and defensive, with Viscount Humir of the Humir Trading Guild dismissively suggesting that they simply should have been given more time to prepare for such accusations. Charon fixed him with a cold stare, noting the name for his records. He informed the Viscount that he would personally pass his name along to his grandfather, the Commissioner. This caused the Viscount to pale instantly, his voice trembling as he begged Charon to reconsider. The hallway soon filled with the rhythmic stomping of boots as a different door flew open. An official announced the arrival of Special Division 1 of the Tax Bureau, followed immediately by Gale. The commissioner did not waste time with pleasantries. He began shouting that every trading guild present was now subject to a rigorous tax investigation. He cited reports of illicit wealth gained through smuggling and tax evasion, noting that the emperor himself had ordered a thorough inquiry. Charon watched from the sidelines with a smirk, thinking that his grandfather looked more like a battle-hardened soldier than a government official. Nearby, Leo whispered to Hans, asking if Special Division 1 was truly as frightening as they appeared. Hans confirmed that they were indeed terrifying, explaining that they handled the most powerful guilds and nobles, possessing the authority to mobilize the Imperial Guard if necessary. He noted that in the face of such men, a failure to pay taxes could result in being beaten down. Gale's stern countenance shifted the moment he laid eyes on his grandson. He approached with a look of relief, noting it had been 3 years since they last met. Charon smiled warmly, assuring his grandfather that he had been well. As they moved outside for a more private conversation, Gale fretted over Charon's condition, asking repeatedly if he needed medical treatment. Charon insisted he was fine, leading Gale to ask if he had any masterminds in mind for the attack. Charon shook his head. He reasoned that if his own uncles had been behind it, there would be no traces left behind. Instead, the attackers had left deliberate clues, almost as if they wanted the blame to fall on the Paba Sultanate. Gale tapped Charon's head, asking if he intended to find and punish the culprits himself. Before Karen could answer, Gale voiced his opposition to such a plan. He acknowledged Karan's talents, but warned that the world was wide and full of dangerous people, and that danger still lurked nearby. He commanded Karan to stay put and prepare to leave for the capital the next morning, as the Emperor had requested. Karen gave a dutiful response, promising to behave quietly, though Gale sighed inwardly, sensing that the boy had absolutely no intention of keeping that promise. The focus shifted briefly to a residence where a family was hurriedly loading a horse carriage. The man of the house urged them to evacuate first, promising his wife he would follow shortly. High above on the roof, a masked man spoke into a communicator, confirming the family had been moved and that the pursuit was ongoing. He was told there must be no mistakes, and he vanished into the night to fulfill his role. Back in his room, Karan was interrupted by the arrival of Xeris, who found him polishing his sword at midnight. Xeris asked if he was planning to stir up trouble again, and Karen dryly remarked that he hadn't expected nagging so soon after his arrival. When Xeris mentioned that the commissioner had forbidden anyone from going out, Karen asked if Xeris intended to stop him as well. Xeris clarified that he was only there to deliver a command from the head of the house, not Gale, but Duke Halo. The Duke's orders were explicit. Karen was to track down the culprits and exact a blood price for the dead, showing them the true meaning of the law of Cheonghae Castle. Karen began to laugh, his face twisting into a smirk as he formally accepted the command. Xeris watched him, feeling the weight of the coming night, and thinking it would be a very long one. Under the cover of darkness, Karen and Leo moved through the busy merchant streets toward the Eastern District, where illegal dealings were known to run rampant. Leo voiced his frustration to Karen regarding the mission's costume, demanding to know why he had been relegated to the role of the slave while Karen wore the chic robe. Karen told him to be quiet, explaining that young nobles wandering such a place without attendants would attract unnecessary suspicion. As they reached the heart of the district, Leo noted the unsettling atmosphere, but Karen told him he could turn back if he was scared. A shadow moved, and Julio, an informant sent by Xeris, greeted them. He escorted the young masters to a safe house equipped with soundproofing artifacts. Once inside, Karen removed his mask and questioned how a man from Thebes became a Reston informant. Julio explained he was simply repaying a kindness Xeris had shown him in his youth. They got straight to business, discussing who could have obtained the smuggled explosives. Julio identified two primary groups in the black market, the Kerr group and the Caligo group. He noted that the Kerr group was attempting to go legitimate, while Caligo, a group made up of former slaves, would do anything for money. Crucially, Julio reported that Caligo members had left the city just before the train was attacked. Karen decided that since those with nothing to lose acted most recklessly, they would target Caligo. Julio agreed to guide them to Caligo's black market hideout. Meanwhile, in a different building, Gale was speaking with Mayor Grine. The mayor asked if it was truly all right to let Karen roam, but Gale admitted that Duke Halo had sent a letter personally requesting it. The mayor noted that wolves have their own ways, and confessed that Karen had asked for a favor to keep Gale occupied so he could move freely. Gale worried about Karan's safety, noting he was only 13, but the mayor reminded him that for a genius, age was just a number. They discussed the danger of Thebes, where powerful guilds bought political influence and enemies of House Reston lurked. The mayor also revealed that Sir Mason, the 8-star knight known as the Undulating Shield, was currently in the city, an omen of coming instability. Karen, Leo, and Julio reached the entrance to the Caligo hideout, a brutal setup that could be sealed from the inside in an emergency. They moved through a hidden passage behind a bookshelf and entered the market space, only to be blocked by two large bodyguards. One of the men recognized Julio, but claimed the chairman had ordered that no customers be allowed in today. When Julio asked for a reason, the guard became hostile. Karen walked up, his hand on his sword, and challenged the man to try and cut them down. The bodyguard glared at the boy, and Karen realized it was time for the second phase of his plan. As the guards took their stances to attack, the air in the underground market turned cold, with the promise of violence. When words failed, Karen Reston saw no other way but to act, dashing into the scene with a fearless intensity that left Leo watching in silent anticipation. With his sword firmly in hand, Karen launched a swift attack on the men blocking his path, cutting through their steel with such ease that it left his opponents reeling in shock. The second man screamed in fury, demanding to know what exactly Karen thought he was doing as he glared at the young noble. But the pressure only increased as Leo refused to stay on the sidelines and dashed forward to join the assault. Julio found himself utterly astonished by the display. Before the enemies could recover, Karen and Leo had already systematically dismantled their defenses, cutting down every blade until the men were left entirely weaponless. This efficiency prompted Leo to complain to Karen, asking him to please inform him the next time he planned to act so suddenly. though Charon merely laughed, observing that Leo seemed to be enjoying the thrill of the fight just as much as he was. Watching the interaction, Julio concluded that it was no wonder Lord Zereth allowed them to run wild through the streets of Thebes at night, given their overwhelming competence. This chaotic energy took a new turn when Charon declared it was time to start playing hostage, a statement that shocked the men and left even Julio stunned, as it was highly unusual for highborn nobles to resort to such tactics. Suddenly, a communication device on one of the disarmed men began to glow, and a woman's voice emerged, suggesting that the violence had gone far enough and asking them to refrain from being so rough with her subordinates. Charon met this with a sharp wit, questioning if the leader of the Caligo Guild truly cared so much for her underlings, to which the voice responded that these men were friends who had been with her through the most difficult times, and she could not bear to see them torn apart by young wolves. The fact that she recognized them immediately caused Leo to realize they were being watched closely, though Charon remained perfectly composed. When the voice extended an invitation to come inside, Charon countered by noting that their bond of trust was far too fragile for a simple meeting. And as an effect of this suspicion, he informed her that her beloved subordinates would indeed become his hostages. He emphasized this by raising his sword toward the man nearest to him, leading the guild leader to sigh. She agreed to wait for them and instructed a man named Carl to escort their guests inside. Charon grabbed one of the men by his armor and began dragging him toward the entrance with a blade held firmly against his neck. As the boys moved deeper into the guild, the scene shifted back to Sir Gale, who was holding a meeting with Mayor Grine. The mayor cited that Sir Mason Paul, the legendary 8-star knight, had been spotted in Thebes. Gale then realized that if Mason was present, then a certain highborn illegitimate son was likely with him as well, the reckless 6th Prince Revelio. The mayor attempted to soothe Gale's worries. However, Gale pointed out that the prince's actions were famously impossible to predict, making him a volatile element. While the mayor suggested the prince might have simply come to Thebes because it was a hub for magical items, Gale's true fear was the high probability that the prince would encounter Charon. Knowing Charon's personality, Gale noted that if the boy had nothing to do, he would surely go out looking for trouble, a thought that cast a shadow of worry over the mayor's face. Back at the Caligo Guild, Charon kicked the door open and walked inside, only to be met with a man in a golden mask calmly sipping coffee while another stood watch beside him. Upon seeing the intruder, the masked man dropped his cup and spoke Charon's full name, causing Charon to wonder how he had been recognized so instantly. The man walked toward him, mentioning how he never expected to meet the famous Karen Reston in a place like this. Charon's attention shifted immediately to the man standing in the background, as he sensed a surge of mana energy that was easily on par with an 8-star knight like Sabina or Zerath. Leo shared these concerns, which Charon confirmed by stating that the man was clearly no mere street brawler. Turning back to the man in the mask, Charon demanded to know if he was the head of the Caligo Guild, but the man instead claimed he had only come there to meet his sister. When Charon questioned if he was the younger sibling of the guild leader, the masked man laughed, stating that adopted siblings suited their relationship more. This mention of siblings triggered a fierce response in Charon. He gripped his sword and dashed forward with a scream. Despite the sudden lethal charge, the man in the mask remained unbothered, laughing and turning to his companion Mason to joke about how he had actually become Charon's hostage. Indeed, Charon had cornered him, holding a blade to his throat, but the man found the situation better than he had expected, asking Charon if his next move was a ransom demand or a death threat. As Charon looked into the man's golden eyes and noted his jet black hair and the 8-star guardian behind him, the reality of the situation dawned on him. He had captured the 6th prince. The prince then casually suggested that they should go destroy the imperial palace together, a proposal so wild it led Charon to believe the man was truly insane. The tension was interrupted by a lady with striking red hair walking into the room, who noted with a smirk that the hostages had been swapped while she was away. Aaron glared at her, identifying her as an elf, and sensing an incredibly dense flow of mana from her, as well as from the prince. He realized both were mages, but the elven woman was significantly stronger. When Karen questioned her, she explained that if the Reston family was looking for the source of the explosives used in the recent attack, her guild was not responsible. She suggested he lower his sword and talk, noting that if she had actually been the attacker, she would never have left a trail leading back to her base. To emphasize her point, she unleashed a massive wave of mana that echoed through the room, a display of power Karen estimated to be at the level of a 7th circle mage. This overwhelming pressure caused a level of fear to rise in Charon that he had not exhibited since his journey began, as the woman asked if he was finally ready to start talking. Thanks for watching. More than anything, I really hope you drop a like for this video. Just by clicking on the like button, you are doing so much you can't even imagine. Feel free to check out other videos on my channel. It's a really fun space here. See you on the next one. Bye for now.